Now at 11, a milestone of advocacy for the Jewish faith was celebrated tonight in Mayfield Heights. The 75th anniversary of the local American Jewish Committee drew big names tonight, including both Ohio Senators Rob Portman and Sherrod Brown. Thanks so much for joining us at 11. I'm Lena Lai. Channel 3's Ray Strickland spoke one-on-one with each of the senators on the importance of today's event, as well as the current political divide in Washington.
75 years ago, the American Jewish Committee created a Cleveland branch. It was to protect the Jewish community and to address many issues, including anti-Semitism. Now, in 2019, at an event to celebrate its 75th anniversary, fighting hate is still a topic of discussion. U.S. Senators from Ohio, Republican Rob Portman and Democrat Sherrod Brown were speakers at the event.
This country was founded on the basis that people are created equal and that discrimination against anybody is wrong.
All elected officials have a responsibility to call out anti-Semitism from the president on down.
The two senators are calling for the American people to come together. From division in the country to division in Washington, D.C., both senators also gave their thoughts on the possibility Robert Mueller could testify before Congress.
I'm glad Mueller's testifying. Again, I supported him doing the report.
I just expect him to be honest, as he's been all along. And
Tonight, the president voiced his opposition against Mueller taking the stand.
As an American, you don't want to see your government collude with a foreign government with regard to interfering with an election.
to me, it begs the question, why did the Russians so badly want candidate Trump to be president of the United States? And I don't think we know the answer to that yet.
A man who already testified before Congress, Attorney General William Barr, has been drawing criticism. Democrats claim he is a liar protecting the president, while Republicans continue to call their claims unfounded.
I have called for his resignation because he has done everything he could to deflect criticism of the president, to mislead people about the report.
Didn't maybe answer all the questions to the extent people wanted to, but I do think he provided answers to everybody, and some people didn't like the answers.
Also, during the event, both senators talked about how to combat anti-Semitism and hate in general. They say what's being done is that federal dollars are already started to be used to better protect people at places of worship. And Lena, they call it an unfortunate but necessary reality.
Right, especially in light of recent shootings targeting the Jewish faith. I do know separately that you had a chance to talk to Senator Brown about the 2020 presidential race.
Yes, I did. And he did say that he likes former Vice President Joe Biden. But he says there's already probably 20 to 21 candidates, so he does not know who the favorite is right now. Also, will he be on someone's ticket come 2020? He says no, he likes working for the people of Ohio a little bit too much.
But he is not going to be in the race.
Exactly.
All right,
He's
thanks
not.
so much, Ray.